Hi, everybody. This is Christina from Triathlon Mommy, Dastrom Coaching, and Dastrom Run Clubs. And I help moms just like you start a children's fitness program in your community so that you can have three outcomes: for you to be profitable and make income, earn income, right? This is a business. For you to get fit in your body as well as in your mindset, and also, and most importantly, for you to impact your community with our amazing empowerment program. But whether or not you work with us or we work together, I come in here every Tuesday and I do a training on business, on strategy and tactics, so that, well, again, like whether or not we're working together, these are things that you need to do and think about in order to create a profitable children's fitness program. And today we're going to talk about something quite important, which is market research. And you're going to need to do this whether we work together or not, right? You need to know what your market is, what it looks like, and if you can be profitable in your market. And if you're working with us, we most definitely need this information to make sure that our program makes sense, that we can indeed help you reach your goals. So listen up, because this is something important. This is something that you should absolutely do and think about and know. And if we're going to get on the phone soon, if you come prepared with this information, I'll be much more able to help you decide if this is something that's going to work for you or not, because then we know what we're talking about, right? I can't tell you how many times I get on the phone with a mom and I'll ask her, is like, well, tell me about your community, or what do things cost? And they have no idea because they just didn't know that this was something that they had to do. So now we are all going to be clear on what kind of things you need to do in order to have that market research so that you can make the best decisions for you. Got it? Okay, let's go. So we're going to start with something very broad, right? And then we're going to go zeroing in and zeroing in. So it's like a funnel. And so when we look at it in the broad way, the first thing that we need to know, the first thing that you need to look at is, well, what kind of community do you live in? Like, where are you? Where are you in this country? And are you an urban area? Are you a rural area? What is your community? And in order to define your community, think about how far you would like to drive in order to coach classes. Like that circle, that perimeter, consider that your community. In the future, maybe you want to expand to other communities and you have, staff and coaches and things like that. But for the moment, it's your surrounding community. So how far would you like to drive, or where you would like to work, where you would like to implement this? And think of that as your community. This is important, and people often overlook it. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, because when I was doing my run clubs in Miami, I took a school that was about 45 minutes away. And that did not go so well for me, because at the time I was like, oh, I can handle it. What's 45 minutes? I mean, it's a school. I was so excited. But then every week that I had to drive over there and drive back and pick up my kids at school, because it wasn't it became complicated. So think about how far, like what's going to work within your life, within your life structure. And then, so that circle, that radius, whatever that is for you, think of that as your community. So once you've defined the perimeters of what that is, then think is so what kind of community is this? Is this an urban community? Is it dense? Is there a lot of, is it a New York City? Or is this a rural community? What's the population? How many people are in this town or in this city? What kind of population is it? Is it like an older community where, most of the people are older? Or is it like a really family-oriented area? Are there lots of kids or are there few kids? What kind of income distribution is it? And this is, I know, something uncomfortable for some people, but if you're going to have a profitable business, you need to have a market that's able to pay for your services. So is this, what's the income distribution in your community? Are people really, really struggling? Is it is it an area that is having a really hard economic time, or is it an area that's being prosperous where people can pay for after school activities? So you have to look from, that broad perspective of what your market is, what it looks like. And asking those questions and looking at that is a first step, right? So everything I just said, rural, urban, income distribution, age distribution, how far you want to drive, that view. And that is something that you can get, that if I were to say, like, if you told me you lived, in Salt Lake City, Utah, that I could go on the internet and I could find that out, right? I could see where that is. Like, it's that kind of high level information. Then we bring it a little bit down, we narrow it a little bit more. And we say, okay, so within this community, within this radius that I'm willing to drive to and work on or work with, what are my community partners like? So for our program, we work through community partners, and those are schools, Parks and Rec Department, YMCAs, and I'm going to tell you all of this in 1 second. So I'm going to repeat myself. But we work through community partners. So we have to do a little bit of research of who those community partners are and what is available, right? So you would say, okay, in my radius, in my community, what are the organizations that are already working with children and families? Because those are the organizations that you're going to want to work with and you're going to work through. So just make a list of all the preschools, elementary schools, middle schools, public and private. Make a list of like after school organizations, like do you have a YMCA? Do you have a community center? Who's your Parks and Rec department? How many parks do you have? Is it a central location that coordinates all the parks in the area, or is each park autonomous in terms of how they function? Other great community partners are, do you have a strong homeschooling group? Is there a homeschool association that coordinates centrally things for homeschoolers in your community? What are HOAs? In some communities, the neighborhood associations are really strong and really have a commitment to their community. So is your community like that? Do you have a neighborhood association? Do you have a homeowners association that has programming for the families? Or even sports leagues? Like, do you have a football league? Do you have a Pop Warner? Or do you have a huge soccer club or a swimming team? Because those organizations are already working with your target market, which is children in your community. So make a list of all of these things. And those are that is like the core of your market research. Who are the people that are already working with children and families that you would be able to work with and partner with? Okay. So once you have that list of potential community partners, then drill in a little bit more as to how it actually works. So, for example, if you're thinking of the schools, so what is the dismissal time? What time do they finish? Is it the same dismissal time for elementary and for middle? Or is it, sometimes in some communities within the elementary school, kindergarten, like pre-K, kinder, and first dismiss an hour before second, third, and on. So what are the dismissal policies? What time do they finish? The preschools, what time do they finish? In some communities, the after school activities or like the rec leagues, they go to the school and they work right after school. In other communities, it's like at a central place, and families are very used to like picking up their kids from school, taking them home, and then like at 5 or 6, go back and drop off the kids for these sports at the park. So how does that microcosm of after school programs or of enrichment programs. How does that work in your community? Where do the kids go after school? So some communities, kids stay at the school and they have like an aftercare at the school. For some communities, kids are bused to a central location where they have lots of different activities. So think about what happens once kids are out of these organizations. Where do they go? Okay. And if you are looking at organizations like the sports, like the football league or the swimming league, think about where do they meet? Is there additional space available where they meet? And how many families go? Because a lot of times there is, one kid is doing soccer, the older kid, and then there's like two siblings that are on the phone, while the older kid is doing their soccer. So those kids on the phone, that could be an awesome market for you. So what does it look like for the kids that are in sports? So all of these things you have to look at with curiosity and look as like a little investigator. Like, what does this look like? What does life after school, or what does like enrichment program life in my community, what does that look like? And jot it all down and know as much about this as you can. Okay. You want to be able to know what happens with the kids. Where do they go once they leave their school, if they're in school? And for the homeschool associations, what does that look like? Because sometimes homeschool associations are super organized and they're an amazing community partner, and they have, we'll go here for PE and here for science, or all of these resources. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're like where I live, there is no homeschool association. It doesn't exist. So do you have one? And if you have one, are there central organizers, or how would you reach out to that market? So do your homework, okay? And the places that you would do this is on the internet, of course, but also check with your friends. What do their kids do? What schools do they go? If they go to a different school, what are their dismissal times? What does if you have a friend that whose kid is in ballet, how does that look like? How does she get her child there? Know as much as you can about that, about the enrichment area, about the after school programs. Okay. So now we looked at the community, and then we looked at the community partners and what happens, with the kids once they're out of school. The next thing we need to look at is drilling it a little bit further down, and it's pricing. So in order for you to have a successful business, you need to have a market, and you need to have a price that your market can afford. So some communities, this varies completely across the country. So we have moms in Nebraska or Mississippi or even Michigan or some parts of Florida where they can't charge that much. Like they charge about $8 per class per kid. In other states, in California, in Maryland, they charge over $20 or, between $15 and $20 per kid per class. Same class, but the market can only hold, you have to price what is able, what your community can afford. So this is really important, and you have to pay attention because it is that pricing that's going to determine your profitability. There is no business without profits. Okay. Well, there is the nonprofits, but you need to make sure that what you charge, that people can afford what you charge, and that what you charge is enough for you to be content with the results that you're having. That's another discussion, but you need to know how much income you can make. And to do that, you need to go to all of these after school programs and figure out, what do they charge? So what do they charge for a variety of things, right? So what do they charge for the expensive ones? Gymnastics, diving, horseback riding, football, those sports that tend to be more expensive, like what does that pricing look like? Swimming oftentimes is one of those. And then check your ballets, art, music programs. Even though they're not sports, they're still an after school or they're still an enrichment activity. And then look at the big leagues like soccer, baseball, basketball. Just get a variety of activities that happen in your community and check out what they cost. And usually it's either a monthly cost or it's a cost for a program. So the baseball season, it's a cost for the basketball season. If it is a cost for the season, you need to know how long the season is and how many times a week are the children coached, not games, coached, right? So that you're going to have a coach. Well, I guess you can include games. It doesn't matter. But basically, you're trying to narrow it down to a cost per class. So if you find out that, that you're paying, I don't know, $200 for the season of baseball. If you give me that information, I still don't know what to do with it because I don't know what that means. So you need to be, okay, it's $200 for the baseball season. The baseball season is 2 months. And in those 2 months, the kids have 2 practices a week and they have a game on the weekends. Now we can drill that in to know exactly what the cost is per class. Once that information is crucial. Without that information, we don't know if you can't, we don't know where to go, right? So you need that information because what your profitability is going to depend on is what you charge and how many kids you reach. So if you're in a community that charges $20 per class, then in order for you to reach your goals, depending on what those are, you may need less kids. If you're in a community that can only charge $5 per class, then you're going to have to reach more kids or a lot of kids in order to reach your profitability goals, whatever those are. Okay. So if you do that, that will be as thoroughly and as dedicated as you can. That is going to be a huge step in determining whether this is going to be something that works for you or not. So take the time to do it right. There is no successful business in any market, in any situation that will be successful if they don't know their market. All right. So this is important. So step by step, find the information at those 3 levels: your community, like that global the global level, the programs and like the community partners that are ready in your community, and the pricing. If we have those 3 things, then we can determine if this is something that's going to work for you or not. Okay. So if, again, you're going to need to do this whether you work with us or not. So it's just business 101. But if you have this information and you want to be like, okay, so is this going to work for me? What can I expect given these market circumstances? Then book a call and let's talk, because that I can come, like if you give me that information, I can come in and tell you, okay, this is what you can expect. This is what you can do. All right. So the link for that is www.dsrunclub.com/apply. I'm going to leave it in the comments, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon. All right. Take care. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.